wondered why Inception was such a great movie, besides the fact that Leonardo DiCaprio was in it, along with Joseph Gordon-Levitt? Think back when you first watched the movie to find that the movie you thought you were watching was actually a movie inside of another movie inside of another movie. We know, that was the face we were making too while trying to figure out what was going on. As amazing as Christopher Nolan is though, he wasn't the first one to use this technique. Back in the Elizabethan era, think Shakespeare, a similar technique called metatheatre was often used by playwrights where actors in a play would act out a play as part of the play, which was sometimes part of another play. This happened quite often with plays during the Elizabethan era, and even when plays didn't exactly have a play within a play, there was likely to be a moment in the play that could be analyzed as being metatheatrical. In other words, referring to the process of playwriting itself. So to keep things simple, we'll only be talking about Thomas Kyd's The Spanish Tragedy and Shakespeare's Hamlet. Not the Hamlet that you're probably thinking of though. This Hamlet is a 1603 or quarter one Hamlet, aka the short one, part of a genre of plays called the revenge tragedies. And yes, as the name implies, the entire plot of these plays were driven by revenge, and like any great tragedy, a lot of people die, especially at the end of the play. Really, a lot of people. But what's the purpose of metatheatre in the first place? Why use it at all? Literary critic Horatio Sierra argues that the use of metatheatre in plays creates an indelible connection between the onstage audience and the offstage audience. This paralleling in turn breaks down the fourth wall, aka the separation between the actors and the audience. In short, the audience members become actors in the play as a result of the actors becoming the audience on stage, creatively speaking. This led Professor Sierra to argue that by blurring the lines between actor and audience, the performance becomes visceral, intimate, and personal in a way that compels the audience to be active agents in the moral drama in which they are now participants. For Dr. Sierra, being active agents meant that the offstage audience will ultimately have to situate themselves somehow in relation to the wrongdoings of the characters on stage, and come to terms with their own moral responsibilities. Something that's really interesting, though, is how Thomas Kyd's The Spanish Tragedy and Shakespeare's Hamlet reinforce the metatheatrical effect. The playwrights don't just wait until the characters murdered in the play within a play are revealed to actually have been murdered to reinforce the truth of what happens on stage. They do this throughout their plays by weaving in language that emphasizes seeing and hearing. That seeing and hearing is believing despite the audience being removed from the action on stage. In Thomas Kyd's The Spanish Tragedy, characters often begin or affirm their narratives with lines that emphasize how the truth will be revealed through what they saw and heard. Filippo in Act 1, Scene 3, then hear that truth which these mine eyes have seen. The king in Act 1, Scene 4. The page in Act 3, Scene 5, I must go to Pedrogano and tell him his pardon is in this box. Nay, I would have sworn it had I not seen the contrary. Likewise, Lorenzo in Act 2, Scene 2, and Hieronymo in Act 3, Scene 7. While these are only 5 examples from the Spanish tragedy, there are many, many more lines like these that emphasize sight and sound. Before we go to talk about the importance of these lines, let's look at some examples from Hamlet. In Act Scene 7, Bernardo says, "Sit down, I pray, and let us once again assail your ears that are so fortified what we have 2 nights seen." Hamlet in Scene 7, and Ophelia in Scene 7. Thomas Kyd and Shakespeare weave language of sight and sound into their characters' words throughout the Spanish tragedy and Hamlet in order to stress that seeing and hearing affirm reality. Like Hamlet's quote in Scene 7, seeing someone's guilt is just as real as having the person confess. About my brain, I've heard that guilty creature sitting in a play hath by the very coming of the scene confessed a murder. This is supported by Sarah Alderson Murphy's argument that the use of stage ghosts in theater illuminate theater itself and the interactive physical experience of playgoing. The presence of a stage ghost highlights theater itself because ghosts are able to affect the characters on stage in a way that is similar to how the audience is affected by the play. While the ghost does not physically partake in any of the action, like the audience, the ghost is as invested in the conflict as the offstage audience. The focus on sight and sound within Thomas Kidd's Spanish Tragedy and Shakespeare's Hamlet, along with their uses of stage ghosts, reinforce how drama is the epitome of a communication structure that ruptures a sender-receiver binary that posits the latter as passive. Thanks for watching, and comment down below to continue the conversation, because like watching a play, the experience doesn't really end even when the play does.